This is one of the 17 volumes of Henry Dresser's A History of the Birds of Europe, which is a new acquisition for Manchester Museum and the John Rylands Library of the University of Manchester. And we are really excited to have these as a new part of our collections, as a joint acquisition.
With regards to the Henry Dresser that's currently at the museum, we will be receiving that here at the John Rylands in February of 2026. Once it arrives here at the John Rylands Library, it will be catalogued, conserved by our collection care team, and it will be stored in one of our secure, environmentally controlled storage areas. It will also then be made available for members of the public, academics and researchers to come and look at it in our research room.
So this volume I have open at this, in front of me here. This one is one which shows birds which are perhaps occasional visitors to Europe, the ones which appear maybe in a good summer and have made it across the channel to the UK and get all the bird watchers excited, those kind of birds. And this plate here is one of the examples that shows why this particular book is so special, because this has handwritten notes from Henry Dresser himself along the side of it.
The copy that's currently at the Manchester Museum is a pre-publication copy which has annotations by Henry Dresser himself and instructions to the printers as to how he wanted the finished plates to look.
Describing how this plate needs some details changing to make it look exactly like the bird if you were looking at it in real life.
These are called copy-specific details because they make this particular item unique. We have 2 copies here at the John Rylands of the published work, so it'd be great to compare the 2 and see how his instructions affected the final publication of the item.
And one of the things that makes it really valuable for us here in Manchester is, of course, that the specimens that Henry Dresser was looking at while he was comparing this illustration to an example of a bird was his own collection of stuffed birds that he had amassed over his lifetime, many of which are now part of the collections of the University of Manchester. So this acquisition has brought back together his collection of birds and eggs, some of his existing archives, such as letters and journals, along with now his own personal copy of this book.
So we have at the museum about 7,000 bird skins and 6,000 eggs that were originally collected by Henry Dresser. So they tie quite closely in with our acquisition of the Henry Dresser books. Here, for example, we have a flamingo skin, which was collected in Sardinia by Dresser. We have these bird skins stored flat in drawers because they're a bit different to the taxidermy mounts you might see elsewhere on the galleries. So when we often preserve an animal for display, it'll be mounted up in the form as it would look in life. So it looks great for display and really engaging. But sometimes we don't have the space or the money to have things mounted up into a proper taxidermy mount, and we'll just store the skins flat. And that's often better for science because you're not distorting the skin as much, and you're still able to use it for measurements and for DNA samples and things like that. So even though this is a really old collection, and we perhaps wouldn't use it in the same way Dresser would when he was around, it's still really valuable for modern science. And we also store our birds by family and by name. So that means instead of having them by who collected them, we have them by what species they are. So that means we also have the flamingo eggs, and these are from a spoonbill, which is the same same family as flamingos. And while we wouldn't condone collecting bird eggs today, it's been illegal to collect a bird egg since the 1950s, they're still really important to hold these old collections in our museum. They've been used in the past for conservation research, for looking at the effects of pesticides on bird populations. And so by comparing these modern, more modern collections with much older collections, you can see how things have changed over time. So having these older collections in our museum can still be really important for conserving nature.
Henry Eales Dresser lived between 1838 and 1915, and he was one of the UK's foremost ornithologists at the time. That is, a scientist who studies birds. He had a huge personal collection of birds, bird eggs, nests, photographs, and he had a large network across the world with other people who were similarly interested in bird life.
So this is another dresser item in our collection. It's an album of photographs and cartes de visite that he collected over his career. It's 219 letters and 220 photographs of ornithologists, naturalists, most of the notable people in the field of bird study and natural history in the 19th century. And it shows really how well connected Henry Dresser was with the wider scientific community. There are some notable figures in here included, so Thomas Huxley, Charles Darwin, and Alfred Russel Wallace, who was the editor of Nature and wrote a glowing review of Dresser's History of the Birds of Europe. So as you can see, the album's made up of letters pasted on the left-hand side and the images and photos and cartes de visite on the right. It's a wide range of styles of carte de visite, but as I said, there are some very notable figures included in here. And I'll just turn to this one, which is Charles Darwin. So it's a letter that Charles Darwin wrote to Henry Dresser.
And so this book represents an enormous investment in terms of his time and study. It took 13 years to produce these volumes that detail the history of the bird life across all of Europe. And this really is an enormous treasure for us to have taken on and to be caring for here at the university. The illustrations are done by some of the foremost scientific illustrators of the time, and it represents a real wealth of scientific understanding. And for us now, looking at these, it gives us a real opportunity to look and see how environments have changed and how the world is shifting, and assessing that sort of change in climates brings an additional value to the collections that we hold already at the university.
So at some point in the future, we will digitise all 17 volumes of the Birds of Europe, History of the Birds of Europe by Dresser. It will be done by our imaging team, who are experts in their field, and the images will be created at very high resolution. We will then make them available via the Manchester Digital Collections platform, and in conjunction with the museum, we'll hopefully curate a digital exhibition of the work, comparing them to the published volumes that we've also got in our collections.
Here in Manchester Museum, we have a display of Henry Eales Dresser's A History of the Birds of Europe. This is on display in our Living Worlds gallery, so many of the volumes of the books, some of them are open so that you can see the plates alongside examples of the birds that he would have been studying and looking at, and you'll be able to see that from summer 2025 through to January 2026. So if you get the chance to come along and see us, you can see this volume out on display.